Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Nordic Football Podcast. I'm Steve Wiss. I'm joined as ever by Jonathan Fadugba. And, welcome to the show, my friend. Things are getting very, very close in Sweden, Allsvenskan, at the top of the table and also at the bottom. Just one match left after this particular round. How are things going over there?
Hi, Stephen. Hi, everybody. Yeah, things are going fine. It's one game left to go now in Sweden. So, it's wrapping up. Winter is coming and the end of the season is here. I can't believe it's gone so quickly, Steve, hasn't it? But sad for the season to be ending. But at the same time, we have a hell of a last round in store with the championship, middle of the table and relegation all up for grabs at the moment. It's really quite an incredible end to the season, to be honest.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable, I must say. And at the time of recording, we're recording in the middle of the penultimate round. There's still 3 more matches to go. On Monday evening, Djurgården against Örebro, Elfsborg against AFK Göteborg. That's a nothing match. And then the big one, Malmö against AIK. So at the time of recording, Hammarby are actually top of the table. They have delivered a 2-1 victory away at Östersund on Sunday. They go back to the top of the table on goal difference. But obviously the fellow title challengers playing on Monday, John. So, I mean, they got the win. I think they were like 1-3 favourites, so it's no real surprise. But, you know, they've still got to get the business done at this stage of the season. They've laid somewhat of a marker down, and it's up to the rest now, isn't it, to respond?
They've laid a marker down, yes, they have. And it was a ground out 2-1 win at Östersund. The scorers were Djurdjic and Kalili, and it's a good win for Hammarby. You know, they were probably expected to win that game. I think the fact that Östersund had pretty much secured their safety with a win in their previous match before the Hammarby game, I think that gave them a little bit of leeway. Although they competed well, it wasn't as, do or die as maybe it would have been. So they had a little bit of breathing room there. And yeah, I mean, it went really pretty much to form. Hammarby have been incredible this season. Although they've lost 5 games, they've pretty much steamrolled several teams. Been very good, and they've won their last 7 games on the trot in the league. And yeah, they got the win 2-1 away, and they go top of the table.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of goal difference, they certainly got an edge on Djurgården in that department. Malmö would be much closer between the two. If Malmö win on Monday night, then we're literally looking not just at teams winning on the last day of the season, but by how many. So it's going to be a pretty incredible finish. Obviously, that's presuming Djurgården are to slip up in any way. It's still very much in their hands. But it is still very tight at the top. We've got Djurgården against Örebro. They, according to the bookies, are an absolute shoo-in for that game. I think they're as short as 1-6 in play, 1-7 in places actually. Örebro have got nothing to play for, the middle of the table. You expecting pretty easy work for Djurgården, or could there be a slip up?
Well, you would think that with the form Djurgården have shown, and of course they got there on Monday, they got a fantastic 1-0 win against IFK Göteborg, which was, although it was underplayed, it was a vital win. You know, they had to see the job off there, and they did so in a tough, away game. So, they've come through that, and they've come through other challenges in the last, 3 to 4 weeks. The only game they slipped up in was really obviously losing at home to Hammarby, their big rivals. So they've come through this well, winning all those games. And like I say, the Buya Toure goal was what won it, although there was a lot of debate. And I think if we were living in a VAR age, that goal may not have stood because there was a lot of contention about offsides for that winner. But yes, if we talk about Örebro, I think there's just one thing to point out there, Steve, that may concern or maybe is a point of note for people to think about. Örebro, although they haven't really done too much this season, they're in 9th. I thought they'd do a lot worse, by the way. In the preseason podcast, I predicted them to be quite near the bottom of the table, or bottom 3. So they've done a little bit better than I personally expected. But one thing to just note on Örebro, although, like I say, they haven't done too well lately, and they lost 5-1 at Hammarby just about a month ago or so. One thing to note about them is that they've actually been quite good away from home. They've won away at Sirius, They won away at EFK Göteborg. They won away at Östersund. They've won away at GIF Sundsvall. So, a good percentage of Örebro's games this season have actually been away wins. They're, the good percentage of their wins this season have been away from home. So I think 50% nearly of their games they've won away from home. So that just maybe a small cause for concern for Djurgården fans. But all in all, with 2 games left of the season, it's in Djurgården's hands now. They know if they win both their games, they're pretty much guaranteed to be champions. So, you'd think that home game against Örebro, they'd see it off. But you never know, do you, Steve? You just never know.
I mean, their tough fixture looks to be on paper next week away at Norrköping. But, still technically, they could get a draw against Örebro. A draw and a win sees them to the title, doesn't it? The really big game, we're not going to touch on it too much because otherwise, it's on Monday night, so people listening later in the week aren't going to be as bothered. But AIK against Malmo, one of these big dogs is going to be eliminated from the title race, or maybe even both of them if it ends a draw. Absolutely huge fixture. It's got to be one of them's surely going to win it, you would think. A draw does neither of them any good. It reeks to me of just one of these really tight matches, knowing what these teams are like. But, who do you give the edge to?
Yeah, as you've mentioned there correctly, it looks like one of them is going to slit the other's throat, or they might both cut each other's necks. It depends how it goes. A draw does none of them any good, and of course those might. Well, it was pretty forgettable game, to be honest. But back in June, they drew 0-0 in Stockholm, AIK and Malmo. Malmo obviously lost their last game at Hammarby. So, there's a bit of a wobble, and they lost as well to Djurgården. Apart from that, they've won pretty much every game in their last sort of 8 or 9. I would expect it to be a very tensely contested game. I think it'll be small margins. You'd think that Malmo might get the job done, given they're at home, the home crowd. But, Djurgården really showed the blueprint for how to play Malmo away from home with a really good defensive sort of counter-attacking display. And a 1-0 win, which from Brio Toure. And I think AIK will look for a similar kind of blueprint when they travel to Malmo, when they travel south. They'll look to do the similar thing. I think they're in decent form in terms of results. Smashed Falkenberg 5-1 in their most recent game, and Henrik Goitom there was on fire with 4 goals. He scored, which is incredible, really. But yeah. That's a poor Falkenberg side. This is going to be a much, much, much bigger test. And I think they've got, a fair chance. But it will, I think, part of me, I kind of lean towards them both, as I say, cutting each other's throats in a kind of like a 1-1 draw, if I was to be predicting it. But both teams know they have to win, really, to have any kind of chance of a title here. So that really lends itself to maybe an exciting game.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the head-to-head statistics here, and it's Malmo have the edge, really. AIK have only won one of the last 13 meetings between the two sides. The last 4 all ended draws, a couple of 0-0s and a couple of 1-1s. And again, it just feels to me like if this was played sort of mid-season, it's the sort of game that always is going to end in a draw, the way these two teams face each other. So, at some point, which side for you has got that ability to sort of create a goal out of nothing if they need to? I know AIK are not renowned for their goal scoring, but do they have that bit of individual brilliance potentially to deliver them, at the end of the game if they need it?
Well, it's funny that you should say that, Steve, because if you ask me which team has the ability to pull a goal out of nothing, I'd be tempted to say neither of them. I think both of them are kind of more based around solidity and kind of solidness and maturity than anything else. Really, the top scorer for Malmo obviously is Marcus Rosenborg, who has 11. For AIK, it's Tarek El Yunusi, also with 11. They do have goal scorers in their team for both sides. Obviously, as I mentioned to you, Henrik Goitom, an experienced campaigner, 4 goals in his last game. Chinedu Obasi, obviously the Nigerian, who's got a very good track record in Allsvenskan. They have a lot of talent in their ranks up front. AIK, I think maybe slightly more than Malmo, but Malmo also have that nous and that know-how. But I think both teams are kind of, neither of them are a Hammarby. As we've said, that Hammarby have scored 20 more goals than both of them combined. Than both of them to get, both teams. more than 20 goals. So, and just one thing to know about Hammarby, they've actually broken the Allsvenskan record for goals scored in a season, in a 30-game season, which is Kalmar's record from 2008 when they won the title. And that's since the Allsvenskan went to a 16-team league. That is the record, 71 goals they've scored. So, Hammarby may not win the league, but hats off to them in terms of their ability their firepower, because they've really been the entertainers this season. Malmo and AIK aren't as entertaining. I think one thing that's quite interesting to note as well with the teams is they're both very kind of experienced teams. There's been some discussions in the past kind of 2 weeks or so about AIK and how maybe they're coming to the end of their cycle. They're one of the oldest teams in Allsvenskan actually, in terms of average age, and so both teams rely on that kind of experience. And I think so in terms of goal out of nothing, neither of them are kind of a magic in a hat type team in my opinion, but they're both very solid and very good sides.
Yeah, so some obviously big matches on Monday evening there, which will go a long way towards determining the winner of the Allsvenskan. I'm not going to ask you who your prediction is to win the title this week. It's just can't really do that in the middle of the round, can you? But I'm sure towards the end of the week you may get a few questions lodged your way about the final round prediction, depending on how these Monday evening results go. So on to the bottom of the table, and I can't believe I'm saying this, but every team still has a chance of surviving in the Allsvenskan. It just looked to me like certainly AFC, Falkenberg, Sundsvall at one point, they all looked dead and buried, didn't they? But recent results have certainly given everyone a live chance. Key ones this weekend. Last weekend, Östersund obviously got a victory, which they're pretty much safe, aren't they? Unless something freakish happened with goal difference. And Falkenberg, absolutely momentous win for them away at Kalmar. Sundsvall had been having a bit of a renaissance, but I do believe they blew a 3-goal lead recently and then also lost to Helsingborg. So it's tight at the bottom. John, how do you see things overall, general?
Well, yes, I think we're going to delve into this a little bit deeper today. I think this podcast, we will discuss that relegation battle in a bit more detail. There's been a very, very big game at the bottom of the league. Kalmar against Falkenberg. Falkenberg coming away with a massive 3-2 win in a kind of topsy-turvy game, really. And I think it's worth dwelling on this because with one game to go, it really is a very tight race. There's 4 teams who could go down, really, realistically. There's a relegation playoff, of course. The bottom 2 are relegated automatically. Third bottom goes into a relegation playoff against one of the Superettan's runners-up. So one team can survive with one game left, but the other 3 will have to, fight another day. And Sirius were the ones who survived with their most recent. They got a creditable draw, I guess you could say it was, against AFC Eskilstuna. And that just does enough to keep them up. Östersund, as we say, I mentioned, I think a few weeks ago, 25 points should be enough, and it's proved to be the case. Östersund's, really their game against Sirius was when they stayed up in this league, really. They beat Sirius 2-0 with a creditable honourable mention for Blair Turgott, the Englishman who came from non-league. He got 2 assists in that game and helped relieve the pressure on Ian Birchinall and the club in general. They can confirm their Allsvenskan status pretty much. They could still get sucked into it, but on goal difference, but they have a significantly better goal difference than Falkenberg in 14th. So, there'd have to be some mad swing for that to change. The last 4 teams we got there are Kalmar in 13th, 23 points, Falkenberg 14th, 22 points, GIF Sundsvall 15th with 20 points, and AFC Eskilstuna with 20 points as well in bottom of the table 16th. Now, the interesting thing with AFC Eskilstuna is that we all thought they were toast, but they pulled out a 1-0 win against GIF Sundsvall in the last week's game, and their recent run has picked up quite a lot. They've got 5 points in the last 9. A draw at Kalmar, a draw with Sirius in their most recent game, and a win against GIF Sundsvall. So from really us saying that they are toast, they're actually back into the race now. And that has just made it a very, very, very tight race at the bottom of the league with 4 teams that we're going to kind of talk about now, aren't we?
Yeah, we certainly are. Just before we move on, Östersund's, just considering the off-the-field issues that they've had this year, how much credit do you think Ian Birchnell and the staff there and the players deserve to have pulled that out of the bag with so much pressure on them end of the season?
Well, yeah, you ask me about Ian Birchnell almost every week, and it's kind of difficult to comment on him at times because obviously we've had him on the podcast and he's a friend of the show. I think he's done, now that their status is more or less confirmed, I think he's done a decent job. I think they weren't expected to maybe go down at the start of the season. So from that point of view, it's not been the greatest of seasons for them with just 5 wins. But at the same time, I think you have to realise the context there. It's a completely new team, as we've mentioned in past weeks. The financial problems they have in the background with the chairman. There's a lot of behind the scenes issues, I think, where we don't maybe know about. And in terms of, like as I've said before, the squad in general has lost a lot of good players, really good players. So there was always going to be a dip at some stage. I thought even last season they might have a dip in terms of their form and results when Graham Potter left. But they managed to steady the ship there. But yeah, I think 12th this season is not bad. If they can get the financial issues sorted next season, perhaps they can rebuild and kind of go again. They're becoming a bit of an established Allsvenskan club now in the last sort of 3, 4, 5 years maybe. So they'll be very happy to be secured for 2020. And I think Ian Birchnell can really, given the context of the club, probably can look back and be pretty happy with the season as a whole. I mean, 14 defeats is obviously a disappointment. But I think if you look at it, as I say, in context, it's survival was really the aim ultimately. And they're not out of the woods yet because they could still shut down in terms of their financial problems. But on the field anyway, at least they live another day.
Yeah, well done to Ian Birchnell and Östersund for confirming their survival. And we're going to talk about some of these other teams more and as a specific match, Kalmar, Falkenberg in detail very soon. But just want to switch on to GIF Sundsvall, who they had a great run a few weeks ago, a couple of victories, and then they were 3-0 up at home to Norrköping and blew that, ended up drawing 4-4. Since then, it's gone completely pear-shaped, 2 defeats in a row. AFC Eskilstuna lost to them away from home. I think they've succumbed to late goals. They're now in a position where they have to beat AIK away on the last day of the season. Even that might not be enough for them. Other results would have to go their way just to get into the relegation playoff. Is that the end of Sundsvall, do you think, John?
Well, I think we should have a wider discussion about them in context. I think I'd like to talk about the games first, the Falkenberg Kalmar game first. I think we can talk about the context of the bottom 4 and their permutations. I mean, we can discuss kind of what needs to happen in the last games to come. But I think it's relevant to talk about maybe GIF Sundsvall maybe after we've talked about Falkenberg and Kalmar and how they've actually got to this situation. Because GIF, as you've mentioned there, they did look like they were at one point they looked safe, and then one point they looked like they're down. They were bottom of the league at one point. They've really had an up and down season, to be honest. They gave themselves a bit of a lifeline about a month or so ago with a win at Kalmar and then a win against Sirius back to back, drawing with Norrköping as well, as you mentioned there, 4-4. But the last 2 games have all fallen apart for them, and this past weekend especially was really, really a crushing blow for them. The game against Helsingborg, it looked like it was going to be a draw, which at this stage of the season points count. 10 minutes to go, it was 0-0. Then Helsingborg took the lead through Tobias in the 82nd minute. GIF Sundsvall came back into it 1-1 3 minutes later, and you thought to yourself, well, they've done enough now. That could be it. But then a minute later, they went back up the other end and Tobias scored again. And that is really a massive, massive loss when you look at it in context, because now GIF Sundsvall look like they could well be down. But let's talk about Kalmar and Falkenberg before we move on to the permutations for the last game. And this is really the game that's shaken up the bottom of the league, because if you recall a few weeks ago, Steve, we talked about these 2 teams and we talked about the relegation battle, and we kind of said that we kind of looked at it and thought Falkenberg and AFC were down, and that was pretty much it, wasn't it? And it was maybe who's going to get that relegation playoff. But this past weekend, it was like shaking up a bottle of Lucozade and opening it up, because everything's exploded. Falkenberg, as they say, have won. Gibson's has lost. AFC's form has picked up. Kalmar seem to be falling apart, and it's all just gone haywire in the bottom of the table. The past weekend, the game Kalmar Falkenberg, I just wanted to talk about that because it was a really exciting 3-2 win for Falkenberg.
Yeah, absolutely right. It's certainly shaken things up. It's been, you mentioned a Lucozade bottle there. I think it was more like the Coca-Cola with Mentos sort of thing. Absolute. I mean, look, me and you talked about Kalmar off air. We chatted about them maybe 2-3 weeks ago, and you were saying to me, "Are they in trouble? Are they in trouble?" And I think I bounced back at you. Just look at their fixtures; they're going to be absolutely fine. And I wasn't watching the game yesterday, but I was keeping my eye on the score and the stats. And it's just the sort of fixture you expect Kalmar to. Their experienced team in this relegation battle to just close out the final win they need to confirm survival, or even a draw. But it's gone absolutely a crazy match. 3-2 win for Falkenberg, and you're going to talk about this match in detail. A real good tactical analysis. So heading into the contest, Falkenberg's on 19 points, Kalmar 23. Really, Falkenberg not in good form. First half was 0-0, and then obviously all the goals happened after the break. But how did they manage to get this result overall, John? Because for large portions of the game, it's felt like certainly they're on the back foot statistically.
Yeah, certainly. And I mean, you mentioned there statistically, and you mentioned the context of the match. As you say, it was 0-0 at half time. And we've talked about Kalmar in the past, and, sometimes I know we've got we did a poll about 2 or 3 months ago on Twitter at Nordic Footpod, which you can give us a follow. And we asked what team do you support in the league? And Kalmar were surprisingly one of the better supported teams that from our followers. They have a lot of fans. I mean, we know there's some listeners who tune in and are big supporters of the team. And you often say it, Steve. They're the kind of team that just finishes 11th every season, and there's not much to talk about. Kind of they tune in, they clock it. It's almost like a factory worker. You clock in, you clock out, you go home, and nothing really, particularly notable happens during your day. And that seems to be Kalmar year in, year out for the last, 4 or 5 seasons, to be honest. They have got an illustrious history. They've won the title, of course. But yeah, just seem to have kind of ticked along, really. And you said it even last week, I think, that they're going to finish 11th and that'll be the end of it. But no, that is not the case at the moment, Steve. And they really are kind of looking to start. They really have started to crumble. I think one of the things that is interesting to note about them, they've only won 4 games all season in 29. And, as we've mentioned with Kalmar, they tend to drift along and, they do what they need to do, don't they, really? They're never spectacular, but they kind of get the job done. They always have a mid-season kind of rick where they don't win any games. It happened again in July. They didn't win a single game in July with 5 straight defeats. But you always think that, they look like they had a good start to this season. They always have a bit of a run where they're unbeaten. In the first few months of the season, they went unbeaten for 7 games. They just, but they never really quite do much. They haven't won a back-to-back game. They haven't won back-to-back games at all this season at all. They've only won sort of twice since May. But then weirdly enough, they won away at AIK Stockholm. So, their big wins are kind of, they tend to pull out one big result a season. And that was that. And they won at Östersund as well in September. But since then, they haven't won a single game. This game, you really did think they would get the job done. But it's not happened. And with 4 defeats in 5, they are really, really, I think, in trouble.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned they don't win many games. What was your sense of their approach to this fixture? Did you feel that they were just looking for a draw, or were they actually looking to try and take the bull by the horns and get the win, finish off Falkenberg good and proper and get themselves safe? Or were they a bit too negative? Or were they caught in two minds. What do you think?
Well, I think the first thing to know with this game is that the first half really was just an awful half of football. I think you could find, semi-professional games with as much quality. One thing that I get sometimes frustrated about in Allsvenskan and in general in football is the amount of stoppages in play. I think there's an argument for kind of a stop clock in football. We talk a lot about VAR. We talk, there's a lot of debates about that this season in England and around Europe. But I think a bigger issue in football maybe is just the amount of stoppage time, just the amount of stoppages. And this was a similar game. You could fast forward through minutes of this match in the first half and not be bothered. Taking ages for corners, a foul, and then it's like 2-3 minutes. You actually end up with about 25 minutes of football in a 45-minute half. And that was the case in this match. You didn't get the sense that this was a relegation battle where both teams needed to win, really. It was very, very drab first half. But it kicked into life second half, and it was the game was almost unrecognizable. Romarinho, he scored 2 goals in this match, and his first goal was an absolute beauty, and the second goal was pretty damn good as well, to be honest. Both teams kind of lined up in a 3-4-3 formation, maybe 3-5-2, 5-3-2, however you want to call it. But 3 centre halves in general. And they tried to, Falkenberg's approach was to kind of have a low block and just see out the game. Kalmar were maybe the ones expected as the home side to take the game to the visitors. They didn't really make much of it in the first half. Rasmus Elm is also obviously a big player for them, and a lot of Kalmar's players through their midfield. Romarinho in there and Rasmus Elm, the kind of playmakers. They have a good young talent called Niels Froling, who's their top scorer this season, the 19-year-old, and he had a few sparks here and there for Kalmar. They edged the possession with 59%. But they didn't really do it. Every time they scored a goal, they got the opener, as I say, and Falkenberg came back through Peter and Seema. And every time Kalmar really did anything, they conceded and then came back, but never really looked convincing. And then just really, really poor defending in the last sort of minutes of the game to concede a third goal. And Falkenberg's fans went crazy when they got that. It was a late sort of winner in the 85th minute. And it really opens up the relegation battle.
I mean, this match was 1-0 for quite a long period of time, from 48 minutes till 75 minutes. Just one substitution by Falkenberg in that period. Did you sense that did you see the equaliser coming? And was there anything that they particularly did to change things to get back into the game?
Well, I think it was a bit of I wouldn't say it was a particularly high quality game in terms of tactical battles and that kind of thing. I mean, Magnus Persson is a manager that we've had discussions with, maybe potentially as a guest on the show at some point. I'd like to get him on, the former Malmo manager in charge of Kalmar. Falkenberg, as we know, conceded 62 goals this season, the worst record by some distance in Allsvenskan. They've been really poor. They've been really poor at the back. But no, it was more kind of, I wouldn't say lucky goals, but kind of, Peter and Seema's goal was okay, but it wasn't spectacular. The best 2 goals of the game were from Romarinho from Kalmar. 2 absolute beauties, really. But Falkenberg just kind of hung in there. They didn't give up in this match, and I think the character of the team was something that was quite noteworthy. They didn't, ever give up. They didn't really look like they were going to throw in the towel. Their fans kind of, although there weren't many of them, their fans gave them a good backing. When you bear in mind they'd lost their past 2 games with a combined total of 9 goals to 1, and that's against Elfsborg, for crying out loud, who are not even that good, and AIK obviously. Your head can go down, really, can't you? And you almost think with 2 games left they might throw in the towel and kind of heads go down and feel sorry for themselves and give it all away. But it was a credit to Hans Eklund's team. They didn't do that, and they kept going in this game, and then ended up getting the winner. They had a couple of decent performances. Anton Vede, the 29-year-old, was pretty good in midfield and got himself a goal. Also, Mathisen, the Dane, who popped up with the winner, he had a pretty good game, in fact. But yeah, it wasn't really, I wouldn't say, Steve, that it was kind of tactical battle or tactical changes that really shaped the game. I just think there were moments in the match that they took advantage of, and quite poor defending from Kalmar, to be honest. Especially for the third goal, it was really, really bad defending with 5 minutes to go, and they kind of stunned the home team, really.
Is that? I mean, it comes down to nerves, does that, or what? Because they knew with 5 minutes to go with that draw that they would definitely be finishing ahead of Falkenberg and Sundsvall. Basically, if a draw at that point would have avoided automatic relegation, definitely. And I mean, how did you sense the last? I mean, the winner scored in the 90th minute. Did you sense they were nervous with a crowd on edge? Surely it's a sort of game you just expect Kalmar to see it out, don't you? Or it just feels like they've really shot themselves in the foot there.
Yeah, I mean, it's a terrible result for Kalmar. There's no doubt about that. I mean, they have, funnily enough, they've got one more game, and that's against Sirius. And they lost 2-0 at home to Sirius already. So they've now got to go away to Sirius and get some kind of result. And the funny thing is, I mean, a draw will be enough if Falkenberg don't win against AFC. And Falkenberg's last game, I mean, we'll come on to I'll talk about the final games in a minute. But Kalmar will need a minimum of draw really to survive. And yeah, as you say, it's just poor concentration. You know, we've said it about Falkenberg all season. Their expected goals are actually not bad. You know, they're comfortably kind of mid to lower mid table for expected goals. You know, they're not in the bottom three. GIF Sundsvall, AFC, Eskilstuna, and Östersund are the worst teams in the league in terms of expected goals. And Falkenberg, you've always thought, will it even out for them? Will it even out for them? And it kind of hasn't. But they got their goals this time. You know, I think they got John Chibuki, who's quite decent. Peter Nsima has a bit of a goal threat. I don't think they've quite got the blend really up front this season properly to create goals, but they were slightly more potent in this game. Looked a bit more of a threat in wide areas. But yeah, I mean, even in terms of expected goals against, you know, these two teams aren't the worst teams in the league. Again, they're Sirius, GIF Sundsvall, and AFC Eskilstuna, so all metrics point towards GIF Sundsvall and AFC going down. And Östersund are below Kalmar and Falkenberg in the league for expected goals against. So both these teams, you know, in terms of metrics, look like they should just about survive. But really, that one goal that's just separated the two is a massive blow for Kalmar, and equally a massive lifeline for Falkenberg, because they would have pretty much been down if they'd lost this game.
Yeah, I mean, incredibly, Kalmar could still go down automatically if GIF Sundsvall beat ARK and Falkenberg beat AFC. Kalmar are down, absolutely down. But so they've got to get something in that last game, and only a victory would guarantee them straight survival as it happens. I mean, the last game of the season is Falkenberg against AFC Eskilstuna. I mean, many people will look at this fixture as a winner takes it all, potentially for the third place relegation playoff. I mean, if we do give Kalmar a victory at Sirius, which is no given, but you know, Falkenberg against AFC, winner takes it all sort of thing. I mean, AFC could still get out of this season. It's ridiculous, isn't it? I mean, how do you see that match going?
Well, the funny thing is that you talk about Kalmar Sirius just quickly, and how about this, Steve, for an incredible twist of fate? Who is the manager of IK Sirius? None other than the biggest legend probably in Kalmar's history, Henrik Rydström. Now, there's a big backstory here, because he last season had his contract effectively terminated by Kalmar. He's a club legend. They absolutely adore him. He's played 802 games for the team. He's been there for 25 years, Steve. 25 years at one club. Played his entire career there. Went into coaching. Went into the assistant manager. Went for the youth teams. Was the manager. And his 25-year period came to an end in the beginning of this season. And he is the man who could send them down with a win with his new team Kalmar. With his new team Sirius. So that's going to be a fascinating occasion. He's already said that his heart is with Kalmar in that game. So you know that's probably not encouraging for any fans of Falkenberg or AFC. But he said he's going to try and do his best and get the job done in a professional way. But yeah, I mean, Mr. Kalmar, maybe he's going to come back and help them. But in terms of, if we look at the final games, we've got Sirius against Kalmar, as I've just mentioned there, Kalmar away. Falkenberg against AFC Eskilstuna. In the earlier game this season, those two drew 0-0. And as I mentioned, Falkenberg have conceded 62 goals now. With AFC picking up a little bit of form, can they maybe just do enough? And obviously, as you said there, AIK against GIF Sundsvall. So you really do worry for GIF Sundsvall. Funnily enough, they got a 1-1 draw at home to AIK. So, maybe a bit of a lifeline. But, if you look at it, their top scorer is still Linus Hellenius, who's long gone in the sunny Cyprus. He's nowhere to be seen. When we talk about, you asked me there about Falkenberg AFC, one problem for Falkenberg is just their lack of goals. In general, John Chibuki is their top scorer with just 4 goals. And, that's really not good enough. And I wonder if there's a bit of a twist in the tail here with AFC Eskilstuna, because they have shown, as they did in getting to the Swedish Cup final, they can pull out a result when needed. They beat AIK away from home in the Swedish Cup, for example. They pull out some big results. Can they maybe just do enough? Because if they beat Falkenberg, they will finish above them and maybe clinch that kind of relegation playoff.
The thing with AFC Eskilstuna, they have to win the game. A draw, and they are definitely down. I mean, for me, that would play into Falkenberg's hands. If I'm Falkenberg, I am just gonna sort of take it quite steady for about an hour potentially. If I get a goal, great. But I know at some point AFC Eskilstuna have got to come at you. They've got to go looking for the win. And, for a team, they've been keeping clean sheets recently. It's just a question of getting a goal, isn't it, I suppose, for them. But funny things have happened. I mean, there's going to be all these teams are going to be looking around what's happening at other grounds. Just say GIF Sundsvall are in the lead. That's going to it's going to change the dynamics even more. Then Falkenberg will need to win. So it's going to be a very intriguing matchup, isn't it? But AFC, if they got that, if they need a goal, can they really get one?
Well, that is the question. And one thing to point out as well is that they've only won one away game this entire season in the league, and that was at Östersunds back in August. So to have to go away and win, all right, they're playing the second worst team in the table, or third worst team in the league in terms of Falkenberg, who have been bottom 2 pretty much the entire season. It's crazy that they've just come, out of the bottom 2 now with that win at Kalmar. But AFC don't have any kind of track record really of winning away from home. Falkenberg, from their point of view, they've got a really, really bad defensive record, and they have managed to pick up a few wins at home. Until this game just now at Kalmar, they hadn't won a single away game. All their wins have been at home against Östersunds, GIF Sundsvall, Elfsborg, and Örebro. So, all of those games were narrow wins as well, kind of 1-0s, 2-1s, that kind of thing. 1-0 against Östersunds. I think it's going to be one of those games. I mean, you say it often, Steve, in those kind of relegation battles, back overs. And I think it's going to be one of those games where, it could get a bit wild if there's an early goal, for example. I can't see it being a 1-0, if I'm honest. I think it's going to be one of them where it's unless it's poor finishing, which you can get in Allsvenskan at times. I think it's going to be one of those where, you score 2, we're going to score 3 type thing, and hell for leather to try and clinch that. Try and escape. And just one thing before we move on from this conversation, don't you think it is quite strange that all these teams down the bottom have won 4 games, 4 games all season in 29, 5 games, 5 wins for Falkenberg. But yeah, that is really, it's quite poor, isn't it, really, when you think about it? A team like Kalmar could survive winning 4 games all season, out of 30. That does say quite a lot, I think.
I've been saying this on this podcast for the last couple of years. The standard at the bottom of the Allsvenskan is terrible. I'm sorry. But there's some shocking teams down there. And it happens every season, it seems. The amount of points to survive, you don't really need too much. But I want to talk a little bit about Allsvenskan fantasy before we leave this section. But give us your predictions for the 3 matches.
Or the final games of the season?
Yeah. A relegation battle.
I think that's You do like putting me on the spot, don't you? I mean, that is no, you know more than I. You know more than anyone, Steve. The last game of the season, anything can happen. You can get, I remember West Brom was it 5-5 against Man United. Was it 4-4 or something? You do get just madness on the last day of the season. It is a beautiful thing, I think. Really, that's one of the purest things in the game, in my opinion, is that last day, all teams playing at the same time, just pure chaos everywhere. Managers on the touchline listening to their radio. Fans cheering other goals at other games. Like nobody knowing what's going on. I think one thing's for sure, there's going to be some wild scenes somewhere, on the last day. Whether it's AFC fans, whether it's Falkenberg fans, whether it's, Kalmar fans, there's going to be some really, really sort of heartwarming and really nice scenes. And there's also going to be some scenes of just despair, isn't there? Because two of them are going for sure. And one of them is going to be clinging on for the Superettan battle. If you're going to if I have to put my neck on the line, I'm going to say, I think Kalmar will get a point at Sirius. I think that Henrik Rydström factor is just going to be enough. I've just got a picture in my mind of Henrik Rydström, arm in arm with the Kalmar fans, sort of like, the Kalmar players punching the air, and a bit of controversy there maybe. I think they'll get a point. That would give them 24, and that would pretty much keep them afloat unless, and I say it again, unless Falkenberg win. So the Falkenberg AFC game is the one I really can't call. I think that is flip a coin. I really do. I couldn't predict it, honestly. Both teams have they've not shown much at all season, and somehow they've still got a lifeline. I honestly can't call it. I think there'll be a winner. I don't see a draw, but I can't call it. I think 3-2 to one of them, flip a coin. And then AIK GIF, I think the only lifeline is if Malmo beat AIK. I think GIF go into that game maybe knowing they've got more to play for than AIK. That would be the end of AIK's title. And as I have said to you, they have the oldest average age. The top two oldest average age in the league is Malmo and AIK. And there's been a lot of talk about AIK at the moment, and the manager has also said it, Rickard Norling. He feels it's time to maybe regenerate the squad. I think it's kind of the end of an era for this team, potentially. I can see a lot of transfers in the summer for this team, in the winter, for this team. So maybe just if they were to lose that game, it would sort of take their eye off it, and maybe it would be the end of an era, and maybe he rotates, and maybe that just allows GIF a bit of a lifeline. But honestly, if AIK get kind of a draw at Malmo or even a win with one game left going for the title, I just couldn't see GIF Sundsvall going there and winning. So a lot will depend on the Malmo AIK game, in my opinion, on that one.
All right, well, let's talk about very quickly the Superettan, because there's one match to go. Actually, there's there's still some left of this current round. It's really close, actually, in that league. There's 4 teams are still in the mix. Mjällby are up there. Valbergs, they play each other on the last game, actually. What do you make of it, John? Because we don't know who's going up, and there's also a match involving top and bottom next week. Jönköping against Bromma, who our good friend of the podcast, Sean Constable, is, of course, a coach there now. So a match that affects both top and bottom of the table. How do you see it going?
Yeah, that's the game for me, really. In terms of the title race, I'm not that fussed. I mean, Varberg boys are probably the favourites to go up. Mjällby as well have got a game in hand, so they've got a big chance. But really, I just wanted to say good luck to Sean Constable. He's assistant coach there now at Bromma, and he's kind of jumped from one tough job to another, really, because Bromma, don't forget they were in Allsvenskan last season, so this is potentially back-to-back relegations for the Stockholm club. They have a great academy, and it's a good little club there, and I really do actually hope they get out of it. So good luck to Sean in that one. They've got a really tough game though at Jönköping, who are going for promotion. I remember them a few seasons ago, Steve. They were in Allsvenskan, fighting to get back into it. And yeah, Bromma really have a tough game there. But the other game as well at the bottom is Osters are playing IK Frej. Both teams are in the bottom there. So the best that Bromma can do is getting out of it via the relegation playoff. But they could go down automatically if Osters pull out a win. and they failed to win. So good luck to Sean, in my opinion, and I hope they stay up, really.
Yeah, very best of luck to Sean Constable there. Just before we move and have a break, I just want to talk about Allsvenskan Fantasy. We are coming to obviously towards the end of the round, and for those who are watching on YouTube, I can now show you this current table, the Nordic Football Podcast table, and top of it is BK Hidsingen on 1,880 points at the moment. It looks like he's going to win our league, and then we've got Poor Don Guillermo, and then Neeps versus Swedes, who he was up there for most of the season. I do believe actually top 3.
He's that's a Hacken fan at the top of the table. I don't mind seeing that.
Yeah, you're liking that, yeah.
Where am I?
Well, we have to go a bit further down. We're actually quite close. That's me.
Oh my goodness.
19th, and you are in 22nd place. So we're three positions apart.
Big point out there, though.
We're about 400 points off the top of our table. More than 400 points off the top of our table.
I haven't even. How far close to the bottom of the league is that?
Well, we have 31 people in our league.
I haven't even played my 3 cards yet.
I've got one. I'll be honest. I've been a bit slack with this one in the second half of the season, but mid-table finish. I've done a bit of an Elfsborg, haven't I?
Hey, look at Swede stats down there as well. That's shameful. Mr. Swede stats.
Swede stats is a bit poor, isn't it? But I've
got to play my wild card in the last game.
Insert name here. That's he must have forgotten about the league. Surely 3 points for this round. But that's the Allsvenskan Fantasy. Good luck to everyone in the last round, and but potentially congratulations to Bikor Hissigen there. So, well, we'll have a break, and then we'll come and talk about Norway. So, catch you after then.